Okay, folks, so here is my 2002 Subaru WRX. It has the 2-liter turbo motor, and what I'm going to be doing today is changing out the valve cover gaskets as well as the oil separator gaskets for this piece as well on top of the valve cover. The first thing I've already done is I've already taken off the intake it had, and that was just a bolt here, and then it had one of those eBay looking deals right here, and it was just a 10 millimeter. The first thing I also went ahead, or the second thing I went ahead and did was I took the coils out as well, so that way that they're out of the way. Just remember that your black connector goes on the back cylinder, and then your white connector goes on the front. All these are just 12 millimeter bolts. There's just the two of them. You'll see them. They're really easy to get to. Just make sure that you wind those out and then pull the coil out. For the back one, I had to twist it around and then pull it out. But there's enough slack in the harness that it'll allow you to do that. But then what you have is you've got 8 10 millimeters that go around the perimeter of the valve cover. So here, here, all the way down here. If you can see that, it's right there. And this one I had to use a ratcheting wrench, a 10 millimeter ratcheting wrench to get that one out of there. And then you've got here, one down below here. And then here, there are 3 more down this side as well. Just here, here, and then one at the very bottom. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to pull this off, and then you'll have this rubber hose that you'll have to get off. Take this clamp here, squeeze it, whatever you want to do with it, and then pull that hose off, and then you'll have to pry this out. But I'm going to go ahead and get to that, and I'll start this video from there, okay? Okay, so I got all of the bolts out. There are only 8 of them. Some of the little washer grommets came with them, some of them didn't, so I just left them in the valve cover. The kit came with all new grommets, so I'm going to use those anyways. But what I did to pop that valve cover out is I went in between the air conditioning line and this bracket here, shoved it in between that gap, and then I just pried back. Gave it a little bit of force because it was snug, seized in there, but now I've got it all loose, and I'm going to go ahead and pull that out of there. It will leak oil, so I made sure to have a pan underneath of it. But yeah, I'm going to keep going. So after about a minute of finagling, I was able to pull this right out of the top. My gasket was separated, so that's probably why it leaks oil. I just noticed because sometimes I would smell it coming to stops, and yeah, there were some wet spots around the gasket itself. And then what the kit will include is these gaskets here. Gasket for the oil separator, which also mine was pretty gross looking. So I'll get this cleaned up and get it back in there. So I went ahead and used some brake parts cleaner and cleaned this up on both sides. It's okay, I guess. This oil separator, air separator, it's just 3 10 millimeter bolts, and you've got your gaskets here and the valve cover gasket itself. I'm going to go ahead and get all this stuff put in and go from there. So I went ahead and I got everything cleaned up. I got all the new grommets put on the bolts. All the bolts are the same length, so you don't have to worry about getting them in the wrong spot. But went ahead and got this all put in, back in, got the hose reattached. This was the only real difficult part, is just getting that hose pushed down because there's no motion in it. Okay, so guys, so this will be the last update for the passenger side. What this is I've got the valve cover cleaned up for the most part, except for all my handprints for going back over it. All the bolts are the same length, so you don't have to worry about putting them in the wrong place. I would just go ahead and, like with anything else, make sure that you get them all started before you start to tighten them down. The only real difficult part about getting this back in was getting that rubber hose pushed back down over that nipple there. So you just take your time and it'll go. Okay, I've got the coils reinstalled again. Don't forget that your black collector will go on the back and your white connector goes on the front. And now I'm going to get started on the driver's side, which I will remove the battery and the windshield washer reservoir. To the driver's side here, I have already taken the battery out, taken the battery tray out, which just lifts out anyways, and then I've tied up the windshield washer reservoir. It's just 2 bolts that go there, 2 10 millimeters, and then that's out of the way. I'm wondering if that harness is going to get in the way, but I'm going to get the coils out and then start working on the valve cover and see where it goes. Before this side, I've got the coil pack out. Again, the white plug is going to go in the front cylinder and the black plug goes in the rear cylinder. And then you have to turn the back cylinder 180 degrees to get this twisted and out from between the frame rails. So I'm getting the remaining valve cover bolts out, and I ran into an issue with only one of them. The rear lower will have to stay in the valve cover until you actually pry it off, and it should come out with the valve cover. It's just it hits the rail when you try and take it out. So I'm just going to leave it there. When I pull the valve cover, it'll come with it, and I should be okay. But that was the only one. And then the middle, the center one, I had to take out from underneath the car, which you can see easily from underneath. I didn't want to have to do it, but my socket wrench is just too big to fit down there, so I used a 10mm ratcheting wrench and pulled it out. It wasn't hard though. For the driver's side, I'm going to try and record prying this valve cover out of here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pry bar here and kind of just wedge it down in there in between the valve cover gas itself and the head, and just pry back on this. See if I can get this. There we go. Just pry it off. What I'll have to do, so I don't have to move this wiring harness, is push it towards the back of the car and then kind of finagle it around the fuel filter. So it does look like there's something else connected here. Looks like there's a harness bracket that I didn't notice. Two 10mm. I'll get those out. A note here is this valve cover does host the oil fill tube. So there are two 10mm bolts that bolt it to the valve cover itself. Let's see if I can get that there. So you just unbolt those two 10s, and then the oil feed tube, fill tube, you can just take right out, and then you will be able to just get the valve cover right out. Last piece of advice, so I've got the valve cover out now. It took some definite finagling to get it around the cam caps here because there's not a lot of space. So the key is that you needed to pull it back off of the motor towards the frame rail and then kind of jiggle it upwards towards the top of the motor and then push it back towards the back of the car and then rotate it 90 degrees and pull it up through that area right there. But it's out, so I'm going to keep going, get the new gaskets in. Just be patient with it, try not to break anything on it. That's about it. Okay, so now I've got the valve cover back in there. I've got the oil cap, or oil tube, fill tube, bolted back up. And I've got the coils put back in, so that's everything. That's how you're going to change valve cover gaskets on a 2002, probably most years for the WRX or even the Impreza 25s or STIs. Thank you.